Thank you, Paul. Now, from the first speaker of the negative team, Alec Dawson.
We're too fast. It's not that high. Hello. Good. I'm in the debate at the moment. Can you call me back? I'll give you a text. Okay, bye-bye. I normally just hang up on one mouth, but I thought it would change. Ladies and gentlemen, I think it's hilarious that the affirmative side of the House today have come up here and proposed that one of the things that youth enjoy most in the entire world, one of the things that so many youth enjoy throughout Western liberal democracies and Western society, ladies and gentlemen, is something which is just a game that is shooting equals winning. That is all the affirmative team have described what a violent video game is in today's debate. They've just asserted that any violent video game is where you have a gun and you shoot other people and that means you win. That's all the affirmative team has given us to define what a video game is. Ladies and gentlemen, in my speech I'm going to do two things for you today. I'm going to show you why video games are harmless and why actually there's no association between violent video games and violence in the real world and in society. Secondly, I'm going to talk to you about where violence actually comes from and the nature of violence in society and how video games can actually help to mitigate this. My second speaker, Hannah, is going to talk about the nature of the interaction between people in society and why parents are actually play a much greater role than video games in people's lives. Okay, so firstly, why video games don't actually cause people to become more violent. First of all, I'm going to actually give you a better understanding of what video games actually are. Because all the affirmative team has given us today is that shooting equals winning in a violent video game. That's absolutely wrong. Violent video games encompass much more than that. They encompass games of strategy, they encompass games like boxing on a Wii, where if you punch somebody they get stars flying around their head. It's not violent anyway, it's actually kind of cute. It's just for engagement with other people in your life. There's actually, just to say that violent video games are shooting equals winning. Even first-person shooter games are actually much more involved with strategy and are actually far, far, far more sort of fantastical and taken out of the real world than what video games are. The appeal of video games isn't the violence, ladies and gentlemen. The appeal of video games isn't the fact that you get on there and you shoot people and that means you win. It's the narrative, ladies and gentlemen. And the narrative isn't shooting people and winning. The narrative is where you take somebody out of the real world and put them in a different scenario. Often it's a science fiction scenario such as in Halo where aliens are invading, or it's often a scenario such as a real life war scenario such as games that are set in the Second World War that involve things like that. That is what they tell narratives, they tell stories. They show what has happened either in history or they show just to tell a science fiction story for a bit of fun. The appeal of them is this narrative, not the violence. So that's not what kids are necessarily paying attention to. Like, their attention is held by this constant excitement of violence, in the same way that a film keeps people's attention with lots of special effects or something, ladies and gentlemen. Not like, that's not what the overall appeal is, though. The overall appeal is the narrative. The overall appeal is that enjoyment, that sense of success that you get from any form of achievement. And that form of achievement can come, even if it involves violence as a contingent thing, that's not the overall purpose of a video game, ladies and gentlemen, and we think it's totally farcical for the affirmative team to get up and just propose that all you are is a person with a gun shooting other people. That's completely wrong. Okay, also on this point, I'm going to talk about the empirical evidence around video games, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, they got up and said we've had massive increases in youth crime all over the world. Well, the major increase we've seen in youth crime is in young girls, ladies and gentlemen, and young girls aren't the biggest market for video games at all. Okay? Now, also, 90% of people under 25 in places like America and New Zealand have been playing video games. Not all of these people have suddenly started going out and becoming really violent, ladies and gentlemen, and considering that the most popular video games do include violence, games such as Halo, Gears of War, World of Warcraft, these games may be the most popular, but they're all not necessarily making everyone going out and being really violent. We think they have to do a lot more to prove exactly why that is. A lot more to show why people just sit there and go, oh, shooting equals winning, that's what video games are about, that's what real life is about. That's not true. Furthermore, ladies and gentlemen, because of the fantastical nature of video games, there's absolutely no reason why people should just go out of a video game and think that that's what real life is like. The reason people enjoy things like video games, and the same reason that they enjoy books, and the same reason that they enjoy movies, is because they're an escape from real life. You don't go into a video game and suddenly have weapons in real life. You go into a video game and you enjoy a completely different world and escape from real life. That's the entire purpose of a video game, especially a violent video game, because that's even more fantastical, because it involves things like violence. If you compare that with a non-video violent video game, something like The Sims, that's not a violent video game, but it's a lot more supposed to be like real life. That's what people enjoy. They do this escapism, particularly in violent video games, ladies and gentlemen. So to assert that, people are going to think a video game is the real world, when they're completely fantastical, when they're being attacked by giant weird alien things, when they're in the Second World War and attacking Nazis who don't even exist anymore, ladies and gentlemen, is a ridiculous thing to talk about. Okay. The other thing I was going to say on this point is that kids play video games, okay? Young people, kids, teenagers, they're the sort of people who play video games. Kids play violent games all the time. Kids watch Action Man on TV. In the 50s, kids were sold toy guns to go and kill Indians with. This didn't spawn a massively violent society, ladies and gentlemen. This didn't spawn violence in between people in the home. This didn't spawn all of these things, but it's exactly the same. In fact, it's even worse, because people are buying toy guns to pretend to shoot their friends with. And that is real life, ladies and gentlemen. But it didn't spawn all of this violence. It's a game, and we don't think that that's actually going to create violent societies if you just let people go into and escape into a world. We think it's exactly the same as a violent book or a violent movie, which doesn't encourage people to become violent. It's just a form of escapism, ladies and gentlemen. Now I'm going to talk to you about violence in the real world and how it actually comes from. Violence doesn't come from being able to escape into other worlds and coming back into real worlds and thinking that that's the truth. Violence comes from things such as marginalisation and frustration and disempowerment in the real world, ladies and gentlemen. People who, especially children, can get bullied, they can be in positions where they feel they lack power, particularly when they're teenagers. What we feel on the negative side of the house, is that we often encourage teenagers and children to go and punch a pillow or something to take out this frustration, to take out this marginalisation. Now, video games don't encourage people to be disempowered and to take that disempowerment out on other people. Video games are an avenue by which people can just go and hit some buttons really hard and have a good time that way. They also allow people to actually be more social, ladies and gentlemen, because they're often methods by which people can actually hang out together in tight groups and have a really good time together for some period, including violent video games, ladies and gentlemen, such as games that are both played online or just like a PlayStation where you've all got different controllers and are all having a laugh because you're all like getting on and relating about the same thing. Video games allow people to actually take out their frustrations and marginalisations in the same way as punching a pillow. They allow people not to want to take this out on other people in the real world. If someone's had a bad day, especially a kid's had a bad day at school, they can go home, hit some buttons on a video game, and then go back and hang out with people normally the next day, and everything's going to be fine, ladies and gentlemen. We don't actually think that that's going to happen. The other thing is, like, video game violence often stems from people behaving violently towards them, rather than them escaping into some world. Now, if someone's alone in a video game, they're not having other people behave violently towards them. They're not having other people shout at them. They're not having other people hit them. They're simply off in their own world and able to escape. And as I said, if that sort of thing is happening in their world, that sort of thing that does disempower them, that's not happening when they're playing that video game. In fact, video games are a place where you do have power by definition, because video games are basically on the idea where you're trying to achieve something, where you're trying to win, where you're trying to achieve any end goal. That does empower people. That does encourage people that they can achieve things with their lives. It encourages people to learn skills of problem solving, and encourages people to try and pursue ends which they will achieve with people, which isn't going to just be like, violence achieves things that I want. We don't think that that's right. We think there's a number of things that occur in video games aren't all involving violence, because often, such as in strategy games, where the violence comes from your ability to kind of build a civilization or something as well. There's a lot more involved there than that, ladies and gentlemen. So for all of these reasons, we don't think video games are a threat to society. Actually, we think they can help people take out their violence through other avenues. Thank you.